there, X-Men comic fans. D-Square here. We're going to continue on with my Uncanny X-Men reviews with Uncanny X-Men number 20. We have always been part 4. We'll say off the bat that I thought this would be a conclusion, but it turns out that is not the case. We still have a couple more issues of Uncanny X-Men before we hit the House of X and Powers of X new continuity, X-Men universe, whatever it's going to be. Whatever Hickman's going to do. So let's go ahead and dive into a non-spoiler review of this awesome comic, and then we'll go ahead and break it down for you. So obviously I've already indicated what I'm thinking about this issue. I think it is awesome. I think it is great writing by Rosenberg. I think we're getting consistently good artistry by Mr. Salvador LaRocca, and it continues in this episode. But really, the story, I don't want to say ramped up, but there's some really cool stuff that goes on here. We've got great action right off the bat, an intriguing scene, some, intriguing writing here because there's a little bit of twist. And I say a little bit because honestly, if you didn't at least expect this to happen at least a little bit, I'm not sure, with this character's background, you should kind of expect a little bit of it. But either way, we get a lot of other questions answered. We even get a little bit more new mystery, but we really start to see, how and why this is all unfolded. And then at the end, we get a pretty good cliffhanger with a pretty notable event. So this is an awesome, awesome comic, and I definitely think you should pick it up, especially if you have been following this series. I mean, you've got to, because this is really, really good reveals and stuff in here. Cool action, just all around great stuff. So if you're not following this, I wouldn't say get it because you're not going to understand, but otherwise great stuff. So that is my spoiler-free review, which is go read it. This is awesome. Looks awesome. Okay, guys, so now we'll go ahead and break down Uncanny X-Men number 20. We have always been part 4. Sit back, go ahead and relax, and please enjoy. During a cataclysmic battle in which most of the X-Men were wiped off the face of the Earth, one of their own betrayed them by giving the U.S. government a serum that cures mutations. The government then reverse-engineered a vaccine that prevents the X gene activation in children and began distributing it en masse. With the X-Men largely thought dead and the next generation of mutants inoculated away, Cyclops gathered the few remaining X-Men to attack lingering threats to mutant kind head-on. The comic starts with a scene where a mother and boy are with a nurse who is about to inject the boy with what I can only guess is the mutant serum. She explains that only a small percentage of patients experience a slight allergic reaction. Things go awry as the boy starts to have a major allergic reaction. Blue bumps are forming all around his skin, and he is even vomiting blood. This scene really isn't put into any context, and again, I'm only guessing that it is the anti-mutant vaccine that the boy is getting. Now, 3 days before that event happened, we have the X-Men continuing to track down their enemies. They are on the scent of a mutant group called the Nasty Boys. They actually worked with Sinister at some point, and maybe they still are. But remember, at this point, Sinister is being held by, of course, Emma Frost, who we also know is kind of controlling the X-Men at this point. So, this list coming from Emma Frost, the X-Men are working on it. They come to this place in Washington, D.C., where they do discover the Nasty Boys, but the Nasty Boys are dead. The X-Men are then ambushed by another group of mutants called the Upstarts. Turns out this group, that of course comprises of Cortez, mutant named Cortez, green-haired dude named Fitzroy. I remember Colossus beating him up once in the 90s. But most importantly, Shinobi Shaw, who is the illegitimate son of Sebastian Shaw, he is heading this group. And so the X-Men are like, hey, what's going on? And it turns out that basically this Upstarts is really just trying to pick a fight with the X-Men. And of course, Cyclops is like, hey, you want to fight? Here we go. Of course, the X-Men easily handle this group. I mean, the X-Men are badass. You really shouldn't mess with them. So they're talking to this Shinobi Shaw guy, and he's explaining, like, why they're hunting the X-Men, because, everything's going to hell anyway. And, he starts talking about how, the X-Men are nothing but Emma Frost's pups anyway, so he's at least going to go down fighting. And then all of a sudden he uses his body density powers to make his hand intangible, puts it through his face and head, and boom, he dies. Now, it's not explained if Emma Frost made him do this or he just decided to do it himself. Now, 2 days before the event with the kid, we go back to the X-Men headquarters. It's called Hatchie Towers. It's the swank place that, they got from Moonstar. They go, they visit Beast, and they find out that Scott Summers actually gave Dark Beast here some of the anti-mutant serum in order for him to, find some way to cure him. Now, of course, the rest of the X-Men are like, hey, this is kind of crazy. What are you doing? He gets a lot of flack from Havoc and a lot of flack from Multiple Man. So, Alex Summers starts to get, really mad and saying, hey, this isn't happening. But, Danny Moonstar does tell him, like, listen, we did, we did decide to vote on this. So, we have to stick with those rules. We can't just start demanding stuff without voting on it just because it suits our needs. And, he kind of subsides in his objections but says, you can count me for a no right now. Either way, it turns out that, Beast does create this serum, and he explains how it neutralizes the anti-mutant vaccine so that it will allow children to become mutants once again. Now, they don't ever really show whether the X-Men voted on this or not, but obviously they must have voted yes, because the next thing you see is they have, made this airborne. The Dark Beast made this an airborne vaccine, so they don't even have to, find a way to inject all the kids. They just need to make it airborne. He explains he's already calculated crucial parts of the atmosphere where they could distribute the vaccine, and it'll basically take it worldwide. They only need someone who can fly. Well, of course, the X-Men have Banshee, or this version of Banshee. He's really almost undead at this point, maybe more of a robot/clone. Either way, it's a pretty weird version of the character, but nonetheless, he can still fly, and he proceeds to disperse the vaccine. So this next scene is kind of crazy, and I hope I set it up enough. So we cut back to the scene where Wolverine and Quanon caught Emma Frost, Elixir, Marrow, Mystique, and of course a Mr. Sinister that still has his hands bound. They catch them in the Hellfire Garage. They've come with murderous intent. Wolverine is going to kill Emma Frost. Before, this fight happens, he explains that Quanon, since she is psychic, was actually able to help Wolverine discover that Emma Frost had basically been controlling him, and now, she's no longer in his head, and, it's time for her to die. Well, she calls in, of course, a bunch of, Hellfire Club soldiers. Quanon and Wolverine are cutting through them like butter. Mystique's kind of distressed about this. So, although Emma Frost, tells her really not to get involved, that the soldiers are doing their job, even if it is dying. Don't sully your hands. But she doesn't resist, and she actually starts to fight Quanon. And Quanon, of course, is using her psychic abilities to predict Mystique's movement, so the fight's not going great until Mystique turns into Quanon. But that has no effect. So Mystique then changes into the 90s version of Psylocke, which for some reason gives Quanon pause enough for Mystique to actually impale her with a sword. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't reveal to us at this point if Quanon is dead or just gravely injured. Nonetheless, we then see Wolverine's making his way to Emma Frost, but before he's able to make it to her, a bunch of ONE soldiers come to her aid. They announce, like, we're here to protect, these mutants are under our protection. Wolverine, of course, gets even a little bit more madder at that, the fact that Emma Frost is working with ONE, so he begins to lunge at her, but in midair, these ONE soldiers just light him up with flamethrowers. Alright, so Cyclops, Magic, Danny, Havoc, they're all chilling in Washington Square Park in Manhattan. They're talking about how, everyone that was on their list has, vanished. All their leads are cold. And so Scott actually, says, well, maybe I should go to Captain America, see if he has some leads. Turns out Captain America is actually right there. Captain America and Dr. Nemesis, they walk up to Scott. So it turns out that the vaccine, or what X-Men did with Dark Beast, vaccine cure, was actually made it deadly, and that's why Captain America was here. Captain America says, I was worried about when you came back that you'd make some rash decisions, but I never thought you would be capable of this. And it turns out that kid that we saw in the first scene of this book was a child that was given the vaccine after the X-Men had distributed their anti-vaccine in the air, and now it's resulting in death. Without saying a word other than, a quick command to Magic, Cyclops realizing that they've been had, because Captain America explains, he hasn't been meeting with Scott, so he's been meeting with Mystique as Captain America the whole time. So Cyclops, realizing they're kind of screwed right now, just tells Magic, grab Dr. Nemesis and get us all home now. Dr. Nemesis doesn't even know what's going on. He's like, excuse me, what? But nonetheless, they grab him and shrack. Magic teleports him away. Now, back at the Hellfire Club, Robert Callahan is on scene. He's upset about the situation. Now, Psylocke, or as Emma Frost explains to him, Quanon, that her and Psylocke just shared a body, but Quanon somehow got away in the commotion. So it looks like Quanon may actually still be alive. Robert Callahan is, furious at Emma Frost because he knows that she's been working with Mystique, and Mystique actually escaped from an ONE facility. So he knows that Emma Frost is not being forthcoming and really not a true ally, which, who would think that Emma Frost would have anyone's agenda in mind other than her own? Either way, he orders that she be locked inside this building and is taking possession of the Hellfire Club. Emma Frost does object to that, but there's nothing that she can do. The only reason she is even alive is because Callahan is letting her live, and he, of course, reminds her of that. Now, we catch up with the X-Men, who were teleported back home along with the mutant Dr. Nemesis. They confront the Dark Beast about what he's done with this vaccine. Of course, as always, Dark Beast, acts coy and nonchalant manner, explains that he did exactly as he was asked, which was to make it so that no parents would want to give their child this anti-mutant vaccine. He also goes on to explain that he actually couldn't do it himself, that he actually needed some help from Mr. Sinister. So really, this was all a plan of Mr. Sinister and the Dark Beast. Of course, everyone is furious, but most so is Magic, and she just straight up beheads the Dark Beast by teleporting him halfway through the wall. Havoc scolds Magic for doing this, but she's like, hey, he tricked us into killing children. Now, Dr. Nemesis actually clarifies that the children have not died, they are only in comas. And that Mr. McCoy wasn't that smart, not as smart as himself, and he's actually figured out a way to fix this. Cyclops, of course, says, hey, whatever you need to do, go ahead and do it. And then Cyclops gets a psychic message from Emma Frost. She says, "Scott, I'm going to give you your memories back. Please don't get mad at me, lover. I'm sorry, Scott, but I need you now. I need the X-Men." Oh, so, I mean, what an issue. I mean, it starts with a startling scene with what happens to that kid when he gets the anti-mutant vaccine. Then it goes right into the X-Men fighting the upstarts. Just action-packed through and through. We get some crazy revelations like, Quanon is, what made it so Wolverine could break through, the psychic commands that Emma Frost was giving him. We don't know what happens to Wolverine. We just see that he's, of course, burnt to a crisp, but we don't see any of the ONE soldiers taking him in or anything like that. So who knows? So there's that. Then we see that per Cyclops' orders, Dark Beast was to make a anti-mutant, anti-vaccine that they spread throughout the air, and it turns out that it's harming children, and this is all thanks to Mr. Sinister helping Dark Beast, and of course he dies. And then we now see that at the end of this issue that Emma Frost is giving all of Cyclops his memory back. I don't know exactly what that means, but we will see. Emma Frost is obviously, along with Mystique, as Mystique was the one that was working with Scott Summers as Captain America, so we weren't sure of that before. We didn't know how many times, was it Captain America, was it Mystique, but we now know that it was pretty much all Mystique. So Emma Frost has been doing all this manipulation, and so she's taken a lot of Cyclops' memories. She's now given them back. But what does that mean? What memories exactly? So we will find out next issue. I thought that this series was going to end on number 20. Turns out the great people over at Comics Argo in Elyria, Ohio did let me know that this series will end in issue number 22. So, and then the House of X and Powers of X will start. So this was not the conclusion I thought it would be, but boy, it is a great issue. Not a masterpiece, but it is definitely up there as far as action and story reveals, and just getting us excited for the next episode. So, or issue. I'm sorry. I know I go between those two. You forgive me, please. Nonetheless, though, so join me next time here on my channel. We'll do Uncanny X-Men number 21. On our way, heading toward the House of X and Powers of X event where the X-Men universe will be shaken up, and I will be here for you to help you go through it. Have a great day, everyone. Peace and love.